Hello and good morning friends, welcome to CEC EduSet live lecture. Dear friends, as you know that we have been carrying a series on education in Indian culture. We talked a lot on this topic and today also I would like to tell you all that we are going to talk on it, and this is the last lecture in this particular series, and for this we have again with us in our studios Dr. Shankar Kumar. He is Assistant Professor in Department of History, Hindu College, University of Delhi. So first of all I would like to welcome our guest Dr. Kumar, and with the help of his immense knowledge, immense experience, we would try to understand about this particular topic. Welcome to the EduSet lecture, sir, and I hope that the way you used to deliver your lectures, this lecture is also going to be one of the finest lectures. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Geetika, for the kind words, and good morning, viewers. We have covered a lot of stuff with respect to time and also with respect to its implication on Indian culture so far as Indian education system is concerned. We have been talking of this particular theme from the chronological perspective and also from the perspective of the content, that is what was actually delivered with respect to transacting education in India, and also exploring its social implication as to who were the groups, communities, classes left out, segments of the population left out, who benefited from it most, who got to some kind of a competitive situation with respect to others, and the kind of lacunae that it suffered from. And we have identified quite a few of these lacunae, for instance, the separation or some kind of a segregation between the theory part, the high theory, and the application part of it, the applied part of it, the theory and the skill and so forth. And we have seen it through time in history as to how it unpacked the entire education scenario. And we also see the remnants of it present even in the present times, despite having undergone several changes, several phases of change through Indian history. And in the last lecture, I guess, we had come up to almost the start of the Sultanate period, and that happens to be a very critical phase so far as the scenario of Indian education is concerned. And I think there was a couple of issues left. We were talking about some of the iconic universities that we get to hear of through sources in ancient times, like that of the Nalanda University. Takshila was much prior to it. We get to hear of Takshila University ever since 6th century BC. Jivak, the iconic figure associated with Indian medicine, was supposedly associated with Takshila, and we have a range of bouquet of subjects being transacted, being taught to a variety of students which were cosmopolitan in nature. So this is something that is extremely important even in the Kushana's time, which is part of the Central Asian Empire in north and northwestern part of India. This particular institution did flourish, and subsequent to it we get to hear of another iconic university, that is the Nalanda University, situated in the present day Bihar. And Nalanda University was also a very cosmopolitan kind of a university, where pupils were drawn from various parts of the world at around that point of time, around the Gupta, post-Gupta period. And we get to hear of its reference in several Chinese travelers who visited around that time. And it is the Buddhist doctrines which were primarily taught here. The overall context of education was of course Buddhist, but it was laced with several other subjects of secular nature, and then we get to hear of Vikramshila, which is again adjacent, almost adjacent to Nalanda University in present-day Bihar itself, in present-day Bhagalpur district of Bihar. And Vikramshila, and therefore there are, and then there are quite a few others mentioned in some of the ancient texts. And we don't have very systematized understanding of this as to what exactly was taught in these universities and what was the level of interaction with each other. And therefore, guessing from the curriculum and also most importantly the approach, the cosmopolitan approach, one gets to know that there was fair degree of exposure to other subjects and transdisciplinary approach pursued in these universities. And by around say 13th century, most of these universities did come to an end on account of political skirmishes, and also there are some religious undertones which are spoken of with respect to the Turkish invasion, and these centers being the repositories of knowledge and learning, their demise certainly dealt a big blow to the continuity or the trajectory in which Indian education was taking shape. Nevertheless, with the coming of Islam in India, and when we talk of Islam, let's also understand that it is not only with respect to the establishment of Delhi Sultanate post the Turkish invasion, Ghazni and followed by Muhammad Ghori, and subsequent to Muhammad Ghori, we have the establishment of Delhi Sultanate in 1206 in India, particularly in North India to begin with. And from there on, we find some kind of a change, of course, with respect to the fact that these people had come from elsewhere. These people had come from the, they had the experience of the Persian education system, they had the experience of the Turkish education system. Arabic element of education was also something that they were familiar with. And once they started to stay after having consolidated their political power in 1206, we find that there is a kind of change in approach, particularly with respect to these ruling classes, and the new element that entered into the education scenario in India. Of course, in very small pockets, and since the patronizing states had vanished so far as the Brahmanical or Buddhist or other secular systems of education were concerned, therefore there could be some kind of a low ebb through which these institutions underwent. But we please remember that while talking of the education scenario in ancient India, we had spoken of the fact that state had very little to do with these institutional arrangements of learning in say gurukuls and so forth. So there is a distinct possibility of this tradition having continued. One doesn't know what is the political context, the big political context in which these operated. Nevertheless, there is every likelihood of continuity, because state traditionally used to, it was not at the behest of the state that these institutions thrived in ancient India. Nevertheless, the overall approach that the state had displayed of respect to these institutions could have received some kind of a setback around this time. Now, talking of Islam, let's try and understand that theoretically, Islam is also very respectful of education as such. In fact, the first word in the first verse of Quranic revelation, when Quran was revealed to the people at large, that is Ikra, and Ikra is nothing but education. So, education is valued in Islamic tradition as well. In fact, a scholar, that is an alim, is accorded great respect even in hadith, and therefore, it is said, and I quote from there, that ink of the pen of a scholar is more precious than the blood of a martyr. So, this is the spirit with which education is spoken of in the theoretical, you can say, revelation about Islam. How it actually panned out in Indian scenario, which was a different cultural zone for these Delhi sultans, that is a different thing. But in the theoretical aspect of it, there is fair degree of respect accorded to an educated person, or a person who is an alim or who is a scholar. And we find that these invading armies of Ghazni and even Ghori did have quite a few very notable scholars. Amir Khusro is one such example. For in the case of Ghazni, we have Al-Baruni. So they have spoken a lot about Indian education system and the haughtiness of the Brahmins, and also these accounts acknowledge that they were highly learned people, but would not like to part with what they had known or their wisdom. So at times quite a few things are said about Indian knowledge system, Indian educational scenario, the learned Brahmins and so forth, and some jibes and remarks are also present in these accounts, and that helps us in understanding the state in which Indian education was around the turn of the second millennia, in of course common era terms. And here one should think of a major disjunction that had been plaguing the Indian education ever since, and we have spoken a lot about it, and that is the segregation between theory or the applied part, theory and the applied part. In Islamic context also, we find, and this is revealed through the writings of Barni, Ziauddin Barni, who wrote in the 1st century of the Sultanate rule, and he did serve under quite a few sultans of Delhi Sultanate. And while justifying, please remember that the way it unfolded so far as Sultanate rule is concerned, that these sultans, since they were part of this, they were technically slaves, and hence it earns the label of slave dynasty also. Therefore, they had to procure a letter of manumission from the Khalifa, and quite a few sultans actually did not bother to procure it in real sense. At times, we get to hear of sultans getting a faked document of manumission from the Khalifa, because what actually mattered was the worldly affairs, where of course it is the military might and it is the political dominance that they had already been exercising, and they were mindful of the fact that that particular element is not questioned, and the traditional aspect of procuring a letter of manumission is something which had become secondary. And it is in this context that Barni talks of deendari and jahadari, and these early sultans had to tackle the pressure that the ulema exerted on these sultans. The ulema means the religious leaders of the learned religious leaders of Islam, who were part of the nobility, the ruling nobility, and they would always pressurize the king, the sultan, to act in accordance to the religious doctrines and religiously prescribed way of going about things, so that their own power is somehow articulated, and they become a fulcrum of power in the politics of Sultanate. But the real worldly reality of North India, of course, posed challenges where they had to reach out to the local people also, to the Hindus also, to the Brahmins also, to the Rajputs also, the erstwhile rulers also. And therefore, whenever this tendency was displayed by any particular sultans, the ulemas used to rise in some kind of an unrest, and they used to give this kind of an inkling that there is something wrong going on, and it is this turmoil, it is this sense of unease which Barni, as a person who is actually rendering service to different sultans in scholarly capacity, is writing about the separation between deendari and jahandari, and he says that in the matters of deendari, that is in religious matters, of course ulemas would be regarded important, but he does say that Islamic tradition makes distinction between deendari and jahandari is the worldly affairs, the secular affairs, and in that he argues that the sultan should have more power and should not be bothered about the ulema's viewpoints and so forth. And so that is how it is sought to be resolved in the writings of Barni. And what it tells us, what is of importance to us, since we are talking of that separation, is that even in Islamic learning we find this kind of a separation, and the worldly is somewhat disjoined with the theoretical, with the religious, and so forth, with the theological. And therefore, this continues to go the way probably, and maybe that it got more amplified, more magnified, that gap between the two. However, the Islamic rulers were essentially urbanized rulers, and in the history of this period, with the establishment of Sultanate, it is also, some scholars do argue that it led to some kind of revivification of the urban growth, and post the Harappan situation, then 6th century BC, it is the 13th century where some kind of a revival is happening so far as urban centers are concerned in Indian history. And it is primarily because these ruling class, which have now come to acquire power in Delhi and in the adjoining areas of North India, are coming to establish several cities, because they are socialized with city life, and these cities had the pattern of consumption where manufacturing was required, where weavers were required, where kashidakari was required, where some kind of karigari was required, and therefore they used to have adjacent to the royal household, they used to have separate enclosures outside the royal household called the karkhanas, and that's where these artisans and these weavers and people associated with several other occupational pursuits, particularly related to the luxury consumption, the exotic consumption of the ruling class. So they were somehow given some kind of a space to grow, and they were also these sultans were also great builders, and the testimony of that is present in the form of the architectural specimen that we get to have. And we do find that the arc and beam technique of Islamic architecture, which is taking roots around this time so far as Indian culture is concerned. To begin with, they are false arches, and over a period of time from Alauddin Khilji onwards, we find that these architectures start displaying true arches, in contrast to the earlier specimen, which give some kind of a pretense of an arch-like structure, but actually it is a false arch. So instead of beam and trabeate structure, which is typical Hindu architecture, we have the arches and subsequently domes coming to typify the new skill so far as masonry and architecture of the period is concerned, and that required a good number of masons to come from Central Asia and Persia and elsewhere, from the western part of the Indian subcontinent, northwestern part of the Indian subcontinent, and coming together in the process of building these architectures is yet another addition to the skill, to the pattern that we get to see in the subsequent times so far as Indian architecture is concerned. And there is a distinct stamp of Persian influence, and which is why it is referred to as Indo-Persian tradition of architecture. So there is coming together. In fact, the Firoz Shah Kotla at Delhi, we find one floor following the Hindu pattern of architecture, beam and trabeate. The other floor follows the arch kind of architecture, and so it is coming together, and it gets synthesized the best in Akbar's period, where there is some kind of a political undertone also, and subsequently also we find this element of Persian influence almost getting seamlessly built into Indian culture and knowledge tradition. Talking of the institutions, the institutional ways in which the education was delivered or transacted, so far as the new Islamic rulers are concerned, Sultanate rulers are concerned, we get to see maktabs and madrasas, and also several libraries getting erected by the sultans and the ruling nobility. Maktabs in institutional terms would mean the area, the center of learning, which is of primary level. So what would actually transact between the teacher and the student in these centers would be elementary reading, the skill of elementary writing, some basic Islamic prayers would be taught to them, and so these institutions cater to the needs of the primary learners so far as the Islamic context is concerned. And at the secondary level, which is higher than the maktabs, we have the madrasas, and madrasas would teach advanced language skills, the prayers and the teachings of Quran and also Sharia. So the advanced level of the religious learning would actually be transacted at madrasas. But alongside these religious training, there were several other aspect of learning like grammar, writing, and expositions and so forth, the way you recite it, so the verbal aspect of it. So they were also transacted in these centers, and this is alongside the erstwhile institutions of gurukuls, tolls and so forth, which were probably going on simultaneously around this time, but of course they did not have the privilege of the kind of patronage that they could have received earlier, or the approach of the state was something that could have changed around this time. However, overall, we do get this idea that the urban quotient of the the Sultanate rule and subsequently the Mughal rule definitely was high, and the urban context of the nobility accorded some bit of cosmopolitanism to the entire educational scenario here. However, another important thing from the social point of view is that these Islamic centers of education or institutions did not forbid people with respect to their caste affiliations and so forth. So, in that sense it was open to all, but in gender terms again we find that the women were not allowed to pursue education and learning in these institutions. Of course, we are told that the women or the girls from the royal household, of course, they were given some kind of a learning, but not by going to these institutions. The teachers would rather come to their palace, to their houses, and teach them something. So, this institutional mechanism which was there was definitely not open to girls, and that is where we get to see this gender disparity at work here. From 1526 to 1840s, we find Persian language being the official language, which had tremendous implications so far as learning process itself is concerned. Please remember that Persian was a very sophisticated and very cultivated kind of a language, and it had its own sense of hierarchy, etiquettes, and protocols, and therefore even today we do find that in the revenue records quite a few Persian terms are used, and that goes to establish that it had almost come to permeate the educational scenario and level of discourse in India. And we find that the urban orientation of not only the sultans but also the Mughal rulers tried to establish some of the cities of India, noticeably Delhi, Agra, Jaunpur, etc., as the centers of excellence, as the centers where lot of literary activities, spiritual leaders would throng to these places, and there was some kind of a nostalgia that they wanted to establish with respect to these centers, with respect to some of the Central Asian cities. This is something which is a new element, and the competitive edge in terms of literary excellence is something that is at display during the Mughal period with respect to cities like Delhi itself. For instance, we get to hear that Delhi was known on account of Madrasa-e Nasaria, and this is Nasiruddin's endeavor, and it was labeled as Shiraz. So almost the learning center, or the center of learning so far as the entire globe is concerned. So this is how the projection of cities started being made in these times, and this was the cultural dimension of the political power that the Mughals exercised, or the sultans exercised. Alauddin Khilji is reported to have built many madrasas. Humayun was very interested in astronomy and geography. Akbar is so famed for his cosmopolitan outlook towards education and religious discourse. So it is said that Akbar's ayah established several institutions, educational institutions, where one of his bitter critics, Badauni, acquired education. But with the coming of Aurangzeb, some kind of a reversal is seen in the trajectory of educational scenario, the cosmopolitanism and openness that these sultans had displayed, and there is an element of orthodoxy coming in, and therefore there is this kind of change that we get to notice during Aurangzeb's time. Nevertheless, with respect to the cities, of course, we have spoken of Delhi. In terms of Agra, we find Sikandar Lodi being very interested in according a lot of cultural respect to the city of Agra. Akbar also instituted several cultural, craft and fine arts activities to the place, and we have learned people from Arabia, Persia and also Bukhara thronging this place, and then Sher Shah is said to have given a lot of impetus to Jaunpur, the gateway of the east, so to say. Muhammad Shah is said to have established more than 20 institutions at this place. In South India, we have Bidar, which is again was the center of Bahmani rule, and that was also sought to be projected as a great center of learning and education and so forth. So that is something that we get to see during the Mughal times, and with the coming of the British or the East India Company, and with the East India Company having come to acquire political power in gradual terms, the Charter Act of 1813 is something which is important, because for the first time the state was entrusted with having given the responsibility of educating Indians also. So it was constitutionally the states were, or it was officially demanded of the states to do something about the education or educational scenario in India, and therefore we find the two groups, the Anglicans and the Orientalists, almost at the loggerhead to impress upon the state to do something as per their wishes. Orientalists, as we would know, would rather talk very highly of the Oriental way of life, the Eastern way of life, the native way of life, and they at times would try to imitate some of the cultural practices, like enjoying hookah in the open and so forth. Some of these English officials, we do get to see the photographs in your textbooks, you can see that. And that was deliberate kind of an act, and also displaying some kind of a fascination with everything that was Oriental, in contrast to what was present in the Occident. And then we have the Anglicans who are saying that, look, this is all irrational, and it is the rational component which is high in Western education, English education. And then comes Macaulay's period. We are so aware of the famous Macaulay minutes, where he seeks to combine the politics of the time with the cultural kind of hegemony that he wants to establish through education for British interests. So he wants to create a pool of Indians who are Indians by appearance, but actually British in taste. So they would in future be the consumers of the British products and British ideas, and therefore he pitches in for English education, and he has some disparaging remarks to make about the entire corpus of Oriental knowledge also. We do get to hear of the fact that one bookshelf of English or Western literature is good enough for the entire corpus of Oriental literature, etc. But the Wood's Dispatch, which came in the 1850s, because every 20 years the East India Company had to renew their license to rule and trade in India. Therefore, there we find some kind of a major kind of a break so far as Indian education scenario is concerned. Universities, particularly in the presidential towns of Calcutta, Madras and Bombay, So these three presidential towns, universities came up, and these universities, of course, had to take into account the new industrial requirements also, so of the Indian reality and the colonial context in which it was operating. So we have some skill giving centers also, and it is spoken of that basically the managerial monopoly was retained, and the high positions were not offered to the natives, the Indians, but gradually this is the time when Indian national movement is gaining momentum, and that's why we find that for these positions and these occupational opportunities, we have the rising aspirations of Indian middle class getting articulated through the demands of entry into the civil services and so forth. So from there on, the kind of culture that with which most of us are so familiar with, the English education, and the kind of unease with the native culture, the Islamic madrasa culture and so forth, and those who first took to English education, and the kind of push that it received and the kind of change that it triggered. So that takes care of the historical context in which we sought to understand the culture of Indian education, or Indian education in Indian culture as such.
With this note, thank you, sir. Thank you so very much for delivering such a nice lecture. And I would like to tell you all that if you want to access this particular lecture, you can definitely access it with the help of the YouTube, because we daily upload for you every lecture for your benefit. Thank you, sir. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.